How are you, pal? I mean, thanks for coming on. Firstly, I know you obviously saw what I did with Gary, so I've known Gary for a good few years now. Did a bit of boxing in UFit, not very good, but yeah, obviously I saw that, and I've not spoken to anyone from Cage Warriors or the UFC. So when you like that, I thought, I'll try my luck here and try and see if he fancies it.
Yeah, always, mate. Always. Yeah, I'm alright. I mean, just training and stuff like that. But I'm always. I don't do a lot in the days in between training, so I don't mind. I don't mind the chat. Like and obviously, seen you one with Gary, and it always helps when someone half knows what they're on about as well. You get some requests off people, and you're like, I'm not going on that one. So, but yeah, I seen you one with Gary, so I thought, yeah, go on then, let's do it.
I appreciate it. So for people who don't know, I've got today one of UFC's up and coming rising stars, shall we say, Mr. Jack the Tank Shaw. So thanks for coming on, pal. I know very little about UFC. I know probably a tiny bit more about boxing. So I'm excited where this was going to go today because everyone knows the big names, the Conor McGregors and St. Pierre's and people like that, Bispings. But you're forging a career through Cage Warriors and into the UFC, which lots of people at the top are excited about. So how's things for you? How's the last year been with COVID? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like personally, I suppose I'm physically and mentally, I'm doing well.
Yeah.
It hasn't been the best year fighting wise, just because of obviously with COVID. I've had so I had the one fight this year. I should have had three, but I had one cancelled at the beginning of the year, one cancelled just now in November, 4th in July. But other than fight cancellations and the disappointment of that, I can't complain. I've been fortunate. I haven't been ill with the old COVID thing, and the majority of my family have sort of been all right in amongst the lockdown as well. So,
Yeah.
It's a bit of a mad old year, I think, for everyone, but it could have been a lot worse, to be honest. So, as long as I got my health and my family's health and stuff like that, I haven't got too much to complain about.
So I love that attitude. It has been a strange year. Like, I don't know what's going to happen next year. I think people think 1st of January it's just going to be back to normal, but I don't know. I can't see it. Like, how's training been during lockdown then? Because obviously, lots of things closed, and I know Gary still tried to get some sessions in with some of the boys and stuff. But how's that been this year?
Yeah, it's to start the lockdown, it was rough because when we had the nationwide lockdown, all the gyms was closed.
Yeah.
My old man owns his gym, so like I could go down on my own and use the runners and the weights and stuff like that because technically it's his gym. But
yeah,
I didn't have no one to train with, so I was just getting by on, out on the bike or out running, doing a little bit of pad work, sort of, with my old man. So I was living with him at the time. But other than that, like it wasn't a lot to do. Where I'm used to doing sort of 3, 4, even 5 hours a day training. That had been sort of reduced down to about 45 minutes or an hour. So
yeah,
it was tough, like not physically as obviously, but mentally as well, because I'm so used to being on the go and when's the next session and sort of preparing for the next session.
yeah.
It was just it was as if I'd retired in a way. I just sort of knocked it on the head and just doing bits and bobs here and there. So.
Yeah.
But fortunately then we sort of had the pros pass. So I know in Wales they started letting professionals train. I think it was around about May or June. And obviously we got a couple of pros and a couple of guys who were sort of classed as elite on the amateur scene. So we was managing to get sort of small sessions in, 5 to 10 of us, all tested and stuff like that. But I mean, again, it was better than nothing, but it's not what we're used to. Like, when I was training for this last fight, obviously the gym was open properly again.
Yeah.
I was back in the gym sort of 8 hours a day. Obviously not training that long, but just in the gym, living that sort of lifestyle. Whereas before that, I was training out in the morning, back to the house, bored for the rest of the day, and train again at night. But it's been a bit of a whirlwind. I think we're sort of all right at the minute. We're back open. Obviously, from a business standpoint, it was a little bit worrying at times for my old man. Just paid all the money to go into a big brand new facility, and now, we got shut down. So it was, what's going to happen with that? But fortunately, we got a loyal bunch of members who sort of we've been with for 10 odd years who have, helped us along and stuff like that. But I thought we were sort of on the rise from it now, but it looks like there's rumours of another lockdown coming now. So like you said, people seem to think January the 1st comes and we can forget about it. But I don't think we're sort of in the clear yet. As much as I
Yeah.
love run as normal now, I think we got to prepare for some more obstacles after Christmas now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think so. Where's that gym then? Is that up in Blaenau Gwent?
Yeah, so the gym is in it's Aberbeeg. It is just at the bottom end of Artillery.
Yeah.
It's on an industrial unit, so it's a cracking spot because it's just off the main road. I mean, we've got boys coming from Merthyr, the Rhondda, Newport, Cardiff. So
Yeah.
I mean, before we was up in Blaenau, which you could get, but we was tucked right away in the valley. The sat nav would always take you there. Whereas with this one, it's a nice central location and it's easy to travel to as well.
Class. And what you said then about obviously, training, then you come home and you kind of sat there bored. What do you get up to in your spare time, or what's the missus got you doing when you're stuck around the house?
It all depends. I mean, for a long time, it was a matter of just come home, sort of try and get a little sleep in, ready for the next session, and sort of just watch bullshit on YouTube, really, or listen to podcasts. Or I did get into Game of Thrones at one point, but I've gone off that. I managed to get a PS5 a couple of weeks back, so at the minute I'm reverting back to sort of like a 14, 15-year-old self where I'm finished training, walking the dog, and the first thing I do is just turn the PS5 on and geek it out on there for a couple of hours. But
what do you play?
I've just been playing like Warzone and Assassin's Creed at the minute, but
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed have took over my life, so I've had to give that one a break. So it's getting me on. When you put like 6 hours a day in game time, you need to reel yourself off it a little bit.
Class. That takes you back to like the old football championship manager back in the day.
Yeah.
I'd be going to bed at 2:00 in the morning, having to get up for school at fucking 7. I'll be knackered.
That's it. It's like my missus got work the next day. It's like about 10 o'clock. It's like, I'm ready for bed. And I'm like, I might stay up. Oh yeah, go on, stay up. She go to bed, bang, turn the PlayStation on, let's go.
I'm the same, mate. I'm exactly the same, pal. So talk to us through I know, so you said this year you obviously fought on the Fight Island, which must have been quite exciting. And, I watched your fight back earlier. What was that like, and that whole sort of bubble going into, and what was the process kind of getting into that?
It was a brilliant experience, to be honest. It was something that obviously I didn't think I was going to fight this year when we first got locked down, because I just didn't see shows happening. Obviously they started doing shows in America, and I've got a visa now, but at the time America wasn't allowing any new visa applications. They wasn't allowing any traveling, so it was just the American guys. And then Fight Island came about, and my manager got in touch and said, they're doing, I think it was 4 shows in 2 weeks. Do you want to be involved? So obviously I was raring to go. I mean, prep wasn't ideal. I hadn't trained properly for a good, few months, but it was just no way I could, turn down an opportunity. And it motivated me, to be honest, the thought of, when looking back on 2020, then even when I know I've only had the one fight, we were in the middle of a global pandemic, and somehow I've managed to fly over to Saudi Arabia and have a fight. So it was that was really motivating. I was thinking there's not many fighters over the years who's going to be able to say they had that experience. So that's why I did it. I mean, it was an ideal prep and stuff like that, but I had to jump at the opportunity. But as far as Fight Island itself, I mean, it was unbelievable over there, but it was a tough experience as well. Like we had to do 2 days in an hotel room in London, quarantine before we went. And I'm not joking, it was like a little box room basically, and weren't allowed in there with coaches just in case obviously one of the team had tested positive. Yeah. So, when you're trying to bring your weight down as well, and you go on the back of the edge, you're fighting in 10 days, you've got to find a way to sort of work out in the room. So that was tough. It was just like skipping in a sauna suit and shadow boxing twice a day. And then you obviously spend a day traveling to Abu Dhabi. You've got to do 2 days in a room then over there. And although it's a great room, don't get me wrong, 5-star suite, but there's only so much pads and running back and forth the room you can actually do. But so it did make like the weight cut a little bit difficult. It was tough mentally. I do a lot of running and stuff like that in the camp and to get my weight down. And I think I did maybe 2 runs fight week, which is unheard of for me. I'm running twice a day sometimes, to get the weight for a fight. So it was tough in that aspect. But then, when you look at it on a bigger scale, it was like a 10-mile bubble where everyone there was basically just working for the UFC and working to make sure the fighters had what they needed. And like the W hotels, like something I've never stayed in before. It It was you can just see that money over there is generally no object. We was in the middle of a Formula One track, so that says it all. Like, you know,
Yeah, the Bahrain one.
yeah, you'd be there and
Yeah.
just cars were on the track. But another difficult one, obviously, not everyone knows about, is we fought on American time because there was pay-per-view shows. So basically, the over there then the American time meant the show would start at 3 a.m. So we had to spend sort of 7 days before it in the hotel, you know, going to bed at like 6, 7 a.m. in the morning and then getting up like 3, 4 in the afternoon. So you factor that in with, 47-degree heat, and then it makes for an interesting night's sleep. But there was many obstacles in it, and it wasn't the smoothest of fight weeks just because of the, you know, through no fault of mine, no fault of the UFC, just because of, you know, what
situation.
we had to ensure that we weren't tested. But it was something I'm glad I've done, and you know, if it pops up again next year and the timing's right, I'll be happy to go back and fight again. But obviously I've got my visa now, so I'm hoping to have a busy year next year, because it's not, you know, I got Fight Island and Vegas as an option.
Love that. Do you find, you mentioned there about sort of running twice a day, and obviously running's paramount for a load of fighters in terms of just their fitness in general. You know, I remember someone saying that they could tell if someone had been running if they get clocked in a jaw and they can take it and keep going. Where if the legs wobble, you know, they haven't been running as much. Yeah. Do you find making the weight easy? Because 136 pounds bantamweight, so what's that, 62, 61 kilos?
Just under 61.8. So it's
okay.
Give or take 62 kilo.
Do you find that easy to make?
It's easy, and it is and it's not. You know, I've always made weight, and I've always made weight fairly comfortably, but I've got to be very disciplined for a long time before the fight.
Okay.
You know, I'm not one of those guys who could, you know, jump, unless I was sort of training with a mindset that I'm going to take a short notice fight. I could never sort of jump in on 2-3 weeks notice and make 62 kilo. You know, I'd have to go up to featherweight to fight on short notice. But I always make the weight quite comfortably. I've got sort of a good dietitian. I've got a good routine. We don't actually sweat the weight off. But I've got to be disciplined. No, it's not easy. It's never easy making weight, I don't think, no matter what weight class you're at. I mean, I know the boxers don't do it as much, but in MMA, sort of the dehydration process is a lot more. You know, everybody's doing it. So that's always tough. I mean, I've been tough at featherweight, at lightweight, and obviously now at bantamweight is tough. But as long as I'm disciplined for, you know, 8 to 10 weeks before, which I always am, then I can make the weight comfortable. But running is a big part of it. You know, I've got to be running 4 or 5 times a week to make sure that weight is coming down. But like you said, it's sort of another reason I run so much is because you always see it with guys, whenever they get tired, or like you said, they get caught with a good shot, the first things to go is your legs. I mean, even without getting punched, the first thing to go when you're tired is your legs. So if you can get used to that feeling of, you know, when we're 8, 10K deep into a run, your legs are heavy, but you just find a way to keep them moving, keep them stable. And it's the same in a fight. I mean, you get to that 3rd, 4th, 5th round, you know, your legs are never going to feel fresh. They're always tired, always heavy. You can still function, you know. And you look at people like Nate and Nick Diaz, who are sort of triathletes within the sport. You know, they don't get me wrong, they're not like winning every fight, but you never ever see them tired. And they take a good punch. And I think a reason for that is because their legs are always strong underneath them. They never sort of off balance through being tired, and they don't ever sort of get vulnerable to being hurt. So a big part of my logic is that. And I always grew up around boxers, you know, around amateur boxing, looking up at people like Calzaghe, and you always see the videos, always out running the mountains, running the hill. So it was just sort of ingrained in my mindset. My dad always ran when he was fighting, always up the mountain running, doing hill sprints, and he sort of just engraved that into me from young. And to be honest, I used to hate running at about 17, 18. I couldn't stand it. My old man had to force me out the door. But now I do enjoy it. I've sort of grown a hobby within a hobby, you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Take us on that journey then, from kid in Abertillery growing up into what was obviously is Cage Warriors now. How did you get to that point? Because UFC and mixed martial arts isn't something the average kid sort of grows up training and playing, you know? Yeah,
so I started training. My old man took me kickboxing, basically. I was 6 years of age, just to a local club. And obviously, at that age, I think it was just to try something new and just get me out of the house a little bit, probably. Yeah. And he ended up actually joining the same gym around about the same time. So whereas I was going to the kickboxing classes, he was doing like a very early stage, like a very early form of MMA. Basically, we do like traditional jiu-jitsu. This was before like Brazilian jiu-jitsu was even crossed into this country. We were doing traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
kickboxing, bit of judo, bit of taekwondo, stuff like that. And you know, cut a long story short, 5 years down the line, he was running the gym, but it wasn't his gym in a sense. You know, the instructor was sort of off elsewhere. He was taking all the classes, but not reaping the rewards for it. So, you know, all the boys was on to him, why don't you start your own gym? And that's what he did. And, you know, he started it with the sort of intention of it being an MMA gym, you know, not a traditional martial arts gym.
Yeah.
And obviously I wasn't going to continue training at the other gym when my old man has just opened the gym. So I went along. All the men there were fighters. You know, people like Jack Marshman, Martin McDonough, Chris Hare, all youngsters then, 18, 19. And we're all training for MMA fights. So naturally, I'm doing the classes and I'm training for MMA as well, but without the fight. And it just took off on me. I was there like 4 or 5 nights a week, even as a kid. Knocked rugby on the head to start competing. I mean, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu creeped in a little bit then. We was doing and grading in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I mean, it just took off. This was obviously before like the Conor McGregor and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
And tell like you'd be in school and college, and I remember having tutors in college telling me, you know, MMA is not even a sport. What are you talking about? And I was like, it is. But they didn't really know what it was. It was like they were just blind to what it was.
Yeah.
And then obviously I started fighting. Then I amateur boxed for a little bit. I was competing in grappling from about 12 years of age, and then at 17, I sort of knocked the amateur boxing on the head and went back to amateur MMA. The amateur scene was blowing up a bit. There was more shows putting on proper amateur fights, you know. Because at one stage there was like 4 different rule sets within the amateur. So it was like no head shots. Then there was like a rule set with no head shots on the ground, and that never interested me. Like, so as soon as the unified amateur, then it was called at the time, as soon as that came in, you know, I said to my old man, I want to fight, and he wasn't too pleased right at the time because of his nerves and all that. But you know, it went well, and I think I had 7 fights as an amateur. Did the IMAF Europeans, which is sort of the best way I can explain that is a little bit like the Commonwealth then, or the Olympics in boxing. Did that. It was 4 fights in 3 days. Won that, and then I had 1 pro fight, and then I had a meeting with Cage Warriors then, and Graham Boylan got in touch and wanted to manage me and wanted me to fight for Cage Warriors. So I think I was at the time the first person to sign for Cage Warriors at 1-0. You know, they was known back then as a promotion who sort of, if you was in the upper echelon of the European guys, you would go and fight for Cage Warriors. And if you could win the belt, then you'd go into the UFC. There was no one sort of 1-0 fighting for them at the time. And to be 1-0 fighting for them, but also fighting on the main card on BT Sport was unheard of. That's just that was that. And then that was the start of the pro journey, and it just took off from there. Just obviously fighting in Newport, Belgium, London, the Cardiff arenas then, and selling out that place.
You don't often hear of boxers with a small amateur pedigree. I don't know what UFC and MMA is like, but boxers normally tend to have fairly big amateur pedigree, or they go down that Olympic route, whatever they do before they turn into pro. But if you've only had 7 odd fights and then 1 pro fight before getting picked up by Cage Warriors, that can't be the normal way that people get in.
No, well, obviously it was. So I had 7 fights, and I did so it was 12. I was 12 fights in total at amateur. And but again, what's crazy is obviously, you know, in boxing, you have guys having 200-300 on amateur fights. Whereas
that's what I mean.
At the time, 12 amateur fights was considered over the top. You know,
is it?
At the time, people would have like 3 or 4 amateur fights and go pro. Whereas obviously we're going more down the boxing route now, where you're hearing the guys have like 20, 30, 40, 50 amateur fights before they turn pro. But
because where would you learn your craft if you've not had those fights? Yeah,
I mean, that's it. A lot of the pros in Wales, like people like Jack Marshman and Brett Johns, Chris Edwards, Martin McDonough, they sort of just learned on the job in essence. Learned as they went. I mean, even Brett Johns, who's, you know, probably the best Welsh fighter we've had, especially on paper with what he's achieved. I think he had maybe 3 or 4 amateur fights, and even some of them was like the semi-pro rule set where you couldn't use ground. So he didn't actually use ground and pound at the end until he went pro. So it was just wild times back in the day. Now it's it's more regulated now. There's more rules. You don't go to a show and have all these rule sets. You've got like your cadets and sort of your under 16, which is no headshots, and you've got like your 16 to 18, which is juvenile, so they wear like shin pad, and then obviously you've got your 18s and over, which is the amateur rule set then. But back, like I said, 12-0 was considered, you know, people like, fuck, when are you going to go pro? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Whereas nowadays it's sort of going the other way a bit now. It's sort of, if you have 10 amateur fights, people are in whether you should go pro or stay an amateur.
Yeah.
But yeah, I sort of obviously made an impression, I think, on Graham and Ian. They must have known about me before even signing with them, to seek me out to sign me for Cage Warriors. So
yeah,
nowadays there's guys, sort of Welsh guys, who go to Cage Warriors now at like 2-3-0, but they don't have like the promotional push I had so early on. You know, I was 1-0. Yeah. I was on BT Sport. I was on the posters. Again, I was 1-0. No one knew I was. I'm on the poster with people like Jack Marshman, Lou Long, people like that. And then, you know, then it was like, right, they're pushing me for interviews. They're organising interviews with the BBC for Wales Online, which doesn't sound a lot to me now because I'm used to it now. But back when I was 21 years of age, 1-0, all I ever done was just sign up for a fight, sell a couple of tickets, and turn up and fight in a day. I didn't have to have a camera in my face and, you know, have people ringing me up for interviews. So it sort of immediately trained me quite early on, to be honest. But it definitely, they obviously knew what they was doing, especially Graham being my manager. He sort of prepared me for the big stage, you know, long before I was even on the big stage. So looking back, you know, I'm just glad they took control of my career so early on, because it's obviously, it's a lot easier for me now to do the interviews and speak on camera without stuttering and, you know, having to retake it every 5 seconds.
Yeah, they've set you up there for a good innings. That is fair play to them. That's class. What was that like? I've had a couple of like you call like white collar fights, I suppose. You know, I've had two or three of those. Nervous, like it's tough, it's hard. It's like I'm a bit of a lump anyway. I can't imagine what it's like having to wrestle someone and watch out for kicks and an elbow to the face and some of the other shit you see in the octagon. Like, how do you mentally prepare for that when you are 1-0 signing up to Cage Warriors, which you've said traditionally would have taken on elite and champions and people who are just on the verge of that UFC sort of stardom?
Yeah, mentally, I mean, at the time, to be honest, I just took it in my stride a little bit. But at the time, obviously, looking back, I probably didn't appreciate how big, like you said, how big a feat it was. I've gone from fighting as an amateur then, where you just kick and punch. Obviously, you can knee to the body, but you can't elbow and knee to the face. And now I'm in the deep end, basically. I'm fighting pro. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, not straight in against the elite of Europe. Like they matched me with guys who were just a little bit more experienced than I was.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, right, I can get elbowed and kneed in the face now, but not only is that going to happen, it's live on BT Sport. So everyone in the town is watching, everyone online is watching, and it's like, and don't be wrong, I'm not one of those who like thought that people wanted me to fail, because I tend to get on with most people, but it was sort of, I wasn't afraid of the fight as such, but I was sort of not afraid, but just what I would sort of get anxious about the most is all these cameras being on. I think, there's one thing picking up a loss in your local leisure centre. There's another thing picking up a loss in front of 2,000 people, but in front of hundreds of thousands more on BT. Because when it's on something like BT Sport, like UFC Fight Pass is great, but it's fight fans watching. When it's on BT Sport, you get the average guy who will tune in because he's just on in the night. So it was a big feat in that sense. But again, I just managed to try and switch off from it. Really, I've got a good team around me, experienced coaches, and at the time, obviously, experienced teammates as well. And even though I wasn't training with Brett at the time, you know, I looked up to him, and me and Brett done a bit of training together, and we would I would just drop him a message now and then and be like, right, I've had someone have asked me this, and he would help me along, as well as people like Marshman and Chris Edwards who done a lot of it. And obviously my old man had been there and seen the boys do it as well. So I have many people who could help me along. But again, until you actually have to do it yourself, it's tough. You don't know how to cut the promo, and you know, you don't know what the cameraman's looking for. When the camera's in your face, then like having my first fight on Cage Warriors, I'd had a big win, great finish on top, and then they banged the mic in front of my face. They're like, oh, I wasn't ready for this. I didn't answer questions live on telly without swearing and sounding like an idiot and stuttering. So it just, it all comes so fast. I think I didn't really have time to just sit there and think about it. I just had to get on with it.
Yeah.
In hindsight, it was probably good that they kept me as busy as they did.
Yeah, it's as some sort of introduction, I suppose, into that world, just throwing you in at the deep end and letting you get on with it. Like, is it? You know, when you step in a ring, so whether it's training, but especially on fight night, you step in that octagon, cage is closed. Like, how do you feel? Like, what's going through your mind? How do you keep the energy, like your nervous energy, down? And what's your sort of process leading up to that first sort of bell going off?
It's just sort of focus. It's just for me. I mean, I gotta be honest. I'm not. I'm about sort of. I know everyone says it, but I'm very lucky that I don't feel nerves in the sense of I'm not in there, scared and worried. Because people are like that before fights. Even you hear people like even George St. Pierre talk about how he's scared before he goes in. Darren Till talking about when he fought in MSG, how he was thinking about making up an injury in the change room so he didn't have to go out and fight. So. And these are guys who are some of the toughest men you'll ever meet and at the top of the game. It's not like your average guy who just jumped in and has got to have a fight. But I just don't feel the nerves, and I don't know if it's because I don't think about it, perhaps. I sort of, all I'm focusing on is getting in there, getting the intros out the way, and you're in the ref say go.
Yeah.
But nerve, also you get your butterflies and your adrenaline and stuff like that. But I think because I grew up around the sport, so like when my dad was fighting, I was always out the back watching him fight. And then obviously when he knocked it on the head, he was coaching your Marshmans and your Chris's and all all the old school boys.
Yeah.
I was like 14, 15. I was out the changing room and I'm watching them get their hands wrapped, watching them sort of hit the pads. And although I'm not actually going out there to fight, I'm feeling that energy, that nerves that they're going through, the intensity. It's changing room on a fight night, the environment, you're with the same people you with day in, day out, but it's just a different environment. Together. But I think because I came up in the sport and then obviously amateur boxed as well, I probably had over 100 jiu-jitsu matches. It's just all that competition experience. I think it just put me in good stead where I had that much experience then in dealing with these nerves and the adrenaline dump and the arms pumping up and stuff like that. I've just learned now to just focus. Like, it is in my head, it's just another fight and I've got to just get through the guy in front of me. Don't worry about the cameras now. I don't worry about people watching at home. I don't worry about looking flashy or, I don't worry about getting knocked out or put to sleep. It's just focus on the task at hand. And as long as I've trained hard, what will be, will be.
It's mad. Like, I remember my first white collar, like I was obviously a bit of a lump and the ring walk and I've got the music playing and my heart's out here somewhere and I'm like that because the crowd, there's 500 people in a leisure centre going fucking berserk like. And I'm like that. Well, my mates as you kind of walked into the ring and the ring's there and then they're sat the opposite side first table. Fuck, so I'm there like, come on, clap. And then the bell went and I was like, oh my God, like,
adrenaline down, yeah.
Oh mate, and I didn't, it was a draw. So he was but a bit bigger than me, but he was ripped up where I was carrying, I was 120 odd kilos. So I was carrying some weight I didn't need, like, and by the end, mate, I couldn't breathe properly. Like, I just wanted to be out of there. Like, I don't know how, like, 5 minute, is it 5 minute rounds?
3-5 and then
3-5. Yeah. How, like, I've been in some dark places training wise, just in the gym or what I think would be dark places. How do you prepare for those, especially again, as you're coming through that Cage Warriors and, you became champion at Cage Warriors? How do you prepare for those? Because a lot of your fights are over in the first, second or third round, whether choked them out, fucking knocked them out, whatever it might be. How do you prepare for that fourth and fifth round? Because that's a dark place.
Yeah, it's a tough one. You've got to find a balance because obviously you've got to train hard and like you said, go to that red zone and that dark place to ensure that you're physically fit. But at the same time, obviously, you can't do that every single session because otherwise you would never make it through the week. So I think it's not being afraid to sort of bring outside people in. I mean, I've got my old man and who's my head coach, my old man and Tal. Then also I do my Thai boxing with him at the gym. I also do boxing with Gary. I've got an S&C coach. I've got a nutritionist. I got a physio. I go cryotherapy, chiropractor. So there's so many outside factors that actually factor into you being able to perform on fight night. And a big thing that people don't sort of understand is being able to control the aggression, control the nerves, so that, you know, because I've seen boys who can do 5-5s in the gym standing on their head, but then you factor in the lights and you factor in the crowd and you factor in that, you know, they can say what they want, right? I hear people say, oh, it's nice to get the cage time in and the ring time. If you could pick a 5-round decision or a first round knockout, there ain't a fighter in the world who's picking knockout. Because when you're in there, you just want to get it done and get out of there. But at the same time, I think over the years, especially when I trained for 5 rounds fights, you learn to play the game a little bit. You know, like I've learned that if it's a 5-round fight, there's no need to go bull rushing in the first round. Yeah, if the finish is there, you know, turn on the heat a little bit. But at the same time, you've got to know when to explode and push the pace. But at the same time, you've got to know when to rest and relax. Like what I'm very good at doing is, I like to think I'm very good at doing is sort of being able to relax and recover during the round, you know, like in a good position. And I can hit spots where I know I can make my opponent work, but I'm not exerting any energy. Or, you know, I've had fights where I know the guy, you know, like I fought Scott Malone, was an explosive guy, but I knew over 5 rounds, there's no way he could keep up the pace. And I knew for a fact, he knew in his head that the first and second round was his only chances. Whereas in my head, I know, you know, I can go 3, 4, 5 comfortably. So I'd let him work for the first round, probably give the first round away just through letting him work. But again, he took me down. I managed to get up without using very little energy. You know, he's in on deep takedowns. He's using all his energy to get me down. He couldn't get me down. And I'm sort of doing things where I'm damaging him and working his gas out without actually exerting my own. Same on the feet, you know, ripping the body is always going to take that little bit of air out of people.
Yeah, it's money in the bank, that is.
Rip the body and make people work without trying to knock their head off every single shot.
Yeah.
You know, there's guys even at the top of the game who still haven't mastered that. So obviously, it goes without saying you've got to be physically fit and you've got to be very fit, especially to do the 5-5s. But you've got to have your S&C right, you've got to have your diet right, you've got to have the rounds in the wrestling, the stand-up and the grappling, because they all use different energy systems. Like, you know, I can do 5-5s all day. If you ask me to do 12-3s of just pure boxing, by about round 9, I'm going to start the blow because it's a different energy system. You know, I can't take you down and relax a little bit. But then there are boxers who can do the same thing I can do, you know, where they can take a round off and relax, but while staying safe. So there's many things that factor into it, you know, but the biggest thing I think is not going out there and, you know, working hard to finish them in a round, but then if they survive, you've got to worry about 2 and 3. And like you said, there's nothing worse. When you're tired and you can see your opponent isn't as tired and he's pushing the pace, it just tends to suck the life out of you even more then. It's about managing your body, managing your energy, but, you know, knowing when you can take a little break and knowing when you can push hard to sort of make them work as well.
Is that fit, like, again, just from some of the videos that I've watched, is that fitness one of your biggest strengths? Because I watched a couple of videos earlier and there's one where you've got the guy sort of in a hold, you're both sat on the floor, you're just hitting him in the stomach. And like, I don't know, a minute later, you've choked him out. But you're looking around to the coaches as if they're talking to you whilst you're doing that. And then he's like this, like fucking hand up here somewhere or whatever. Like, you just seem so calm. And after you've won, you know, you don't see like, oh, for fuck's sake, like, fuck, that's over. It's like, yeah, wicked, right, that's done. You seem so, like, calm about
100%.
it.
My, you know, my coach always say my cardio is 100% one of my biggest weapons. And again, I think the reason I'm so calm is because I've just got that faith in my gas tank. Like, especially like now I'm fighting 3-round fights. I know I've got 3-5s in me all day, and I know I can fight at a very good pace for the 3 5-minute rounds. But that's why I stay so calm, because I'm not worried about hitting positions and thinking, right, well, if I don't get him out to you now, I'm going to be fucked, because I know I always got. I mean, I can be tired. What I find with me is I recover quick, so I know I'm fit when I may be tired at the end of a 5-minute round, but within that minute rest, my heart rate's back low and I'm ready to go again. But it is definitely a big weapon. I mean, if you know you can push hard for 3-5s and you're against a guy who's perhaps thinking, right, you know, I'm good for 1.5, but then I'm going to start to blow a little bit. You know that you can afford to sort of take the first round off, let him work, and then come strong in the second and third. Whereas there are fighters out there who, you know, some guys are the most dangerous in the world for the first round, but then if you can drag them deep a little bit, that's when they start to falter. But I've always had faith in my gas tank ever since. I think I had an amateur boxing fight, and in the third round I was blown out my ass. And I remember the feeling. I remember thinking, right, I don't ever want to feel like this again. And like you said, in that third round, blowing, you know, the guy's coming at you aggressive. I remember thinking, right, there's no way I'll ever let myself feel like this again in a fight. Even if I lose, it won't be, you know, through being knackered to the point where I haven't got nothing left to give. So ever since that, I just made sure whatever it was, like 3 3s, 3 5s, or 5 5s, I was capable to do that and more if needs be.
Yeah, fair play. That is some engine, mate. What was it like winning your championship with the Cage Warriors? What was that feeling like?
Yeah, it was awesome. Like that was, and it's one of my biggest achievements. Don't be wrong, it's great, like fighting in the UFC and stuff like that. But I'd won, you know, Welsh titles, British titles, European titles. But to win a world title, obviously, like to me, it was like, you know, I could lose 10 fights in a row now, but no matter what, no one will ever be able to take away the fact that I won and defended a world title. And it was like a big controversy in the sense I was meant to fight in the September. The opponent got pulled out on the day for a brain scan. So they got a late replacement, but he couldn't make bantamweight, so I could fight him, but it couldn't be for the belt. It had to be a weight higher. So I went through all of that, you know, to sort of, you know, I spent 12 weeks training for a world title fight, and then it turned up not being a world title fight. And then they were like, right, 8 weeks later, now you're fighting this guy, Mike Heckendeo's, you know, ranked #1 in the UK. He's got basically online. It was like he's going to walk through me. He was too strong, too big, and I knew I was gonna. I just knew I had too much for him. I was too well rounded, too fit, and I just knew he wouldn't be able to hold me down like he'd done to everyone else. So to win the world title, but obviously to sort of dominate him at his own game as well. I mean, he's known as like this wrestler, you know, nasty ground and pound guy. To just dominate him and beat him up. You know, beat him at his own game, but obviously then you have to, it was for the world title. We was the 2 best guys in the UK and Europe at the time. You know, the stakes couldn't have been any higher. Couldn't have been any higher. So it was just, I just remember like when they put the belt on me and walking up the cage with the belt, I was just like, I've done it. Don't matter what happens now, you know, I will always, don't be wrong, I wasn't sort of satisfied. I wasn't happy, like I wasn't thinking, right, if I lose 10, it don't matter. But if I did lose the next 5 fights after that, I still would have been the Cage Warriors world champion. It's something that no one can ever take away.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, mate. Fair play to you. And I read somewhere that UFC had come calling before, but you said no originally because you'd only had a couple of fights.
Yeah, they came a couple of times. So they came when I first signed for Cage Warriors. I was 3-0. And basically, it wasn't like they sort of seeked me out. Jack Marshman had just signed for UFC. He was managed by Graham as well. And they had to pull out on short notice, like 4 weeks notice, something like that. And they came to Graham and said, like, have you got any I was featherweight at the time. So they said, have you got any featherweights that can step in here? So we sent them a list. And they picked me, but he just said, and in fairness to Graham, he didn't, like, he could have cashed in and whatever, but he just said, no, you're not ready yet. I just told him no. And then
did you want to do it? Or were you happy to let him make the decision?
I was clucking. Like, I would have jumped in there, no doubt. But looking back, my old man, #1, who's the coach, he always has the say. He wouldn't have let me go because he's always had the attitude of when I go to the UFC, he wants me to compete with the best in the world. He doesn't want me there to make up the numbers. And in all fairness, at the time, I probably would have just made up the numbers because I was 21. You know, I wasn't physically developed like I am now. Mentally, I wasn't as strong. Skill-wise, I'm a lot better now than what I was back then. But yeah, they came again then. So I beat a guy called Vaughan Lee in London. That was my first fight at Bantam. So I was 8-0. And I was 8-0, sorry. And I broke my hand in the fight, typically. And they came again for a short notice call. But obviously I couldn't because my hand was broke. So I thought, you're going to start getting pissed off at me. I thought, keep going. And I was before, so I beat Heckendeau. Then I was due to fight Scott Malone, and it was a UFC London. So Graham was up there, and Sean Shelby, the matchmaker, came up to him and said, "Look, when are you going to let us have Jack's show?" And he said, "Look, he's got one fight now in April. He's defending his title." Because at the time I was on like a 5-fight deal with Cage Warriors. They were paying me money that sort of was unheard of then for my last 3 fights with them. People don't make that type of money in Cage Warriors, and I could have stayed there and made comfortable money that guys in the UFC are not even making. But he said, look, he's got one more fight, defend his title. He said he's got 2 fights left on his contract, but let's just have a chat. He said after that, and when I beat Malone, there was the way I beat him as well. Again, it was just like another dominant win. There was no one in the division that sort of the only people left in the division, I would have been doing them a favour by fighting them. You know, there was no one there. There was no clear challenger where people were like, right, this is who you should fight next. Whereas,
Yeah.
second day, Malone was like 7-1, 7-fight win streak, and they were like, right, you got to fight Malone now because you know he's the next guy in line. Whereas after Scott, there was no one there. There was a couple of guys who'd like one or two fight win streaks, but it would have, again, they didn't have a name that would have raised my profile.
Yeah.
I only would have raised theirs. So I spoke to Graham and said, look, I think it's time to go. And he said, leave it with me. And that I fought Scott on the Saturday, and by the following Saturday, they'd been in touch and they were in the process of sending a contract in.
Class. How does that work then when you go across? Because again, I'm fortunate I know a couple of different boxers, and some of them are like starting out and they rely on their ticket sales, and they might make, like Gary said the other week, 10 quid, 15 quid after they've paid for everything. Or, when you go to the UFC, is it like a set contract, and then are they looking after your coaching team as well, or do you look after that out of the contract? How does that kind of work?
Yeah, so there's different legit, like they pay you your purse, and you get money to show up, you get money, then you get double your money if you win, pretty much.
Okay.
So there are guys who are on flat fees. These are like your Conor McGregors, your Masvidals, Nate Diaz, those type of guys, your Khabibs. But for the most people, is you get money to show and money to win. They sort of cover, so like they'll cover one coach for the week then. So they'll cover their travel and their hotel.
Yeah.
You're allowed up to 3 tournaments. So obviously, if you want an extra room and the extra 2, you have to cover the flight, travel, and stuff like that in their hotel then. But they will allow you to have 3 tournament, obviously, but that's on you then. You can either pay the money up front beforehand, or they can just take the money from your purse before they pay you.
Yeah, of course. It's interesting. I didn't know how any of that worked. How did you feel then when you've had your first UFC fight? Was there any different feeling at all? More pressure because you're in the glitz and the glamour of the UFC, or was it just back to business as normal?
Yeah, to be honest, it was probably less pressure because I'd gone from being when I was fighting my last show in Cage, I was like the headline fighter of the main event, and the show was built around me. It was in the ice arena based on the fact that sell the tickets to sell the ice arena out. There was no one else really on. Like, don't be wrong, there was guys on the card that sold a couple of tickets that helped, but anyone else main event, it probably wouldn't have sold out at the time. So they had to build a show around me pretty much, and they were only going there because of me. Whereas then I've gone from that to, yes, I'm in the UFC on the world stage, but I'm gone from fighting like 11 o'clock in the night to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so I'm first fight on. So it felt like being an amateur again. Don't be wrong, although I know I was fighting a tough opponent, like tougher than I'd ever faced before, it was just like very little media responsibilities, a couple of interviews, but no promos, no like going up the mountains with a camera for people to run a trailer, no have to sell tickets either, So it just felt like not a relief, but just like it was less sort of weight on the shoulders going in, because it was a matter of turn up fight week and actually fight, just fight, nothing else. There was obviously the surrealness of like Bruce Buffer and trying on your gloves, your fight kit with your name and stuff on. But as far as like pressure went, I probably felt less pressure going into that fight and obviously the Fight Island fight than I did maybe my last 2 or 3 Cage Warriors fights. That's
interesting, isn't it? Do you get, like, having your profile raised now, like, what is it about UFC? So in boxing, if you've got an O on your record, you seem to be fucking unbelievable. I'm sure you are in UFC, but if you've got a loss on your record in boxing, you're shit, you're rubbish, you're fucking not cut out for it, blah, blah, blah. But in UFC, or MMA, it's almost accepted that because the best fights the best, there's one belt, best fights the best all the time, you will lose at some point. And it's fine. Why is that attitude so different, yet they're both combat sports?
I think, like, Gary, I know Gary touched on it a little bit last week, although whenever he did the interview. But like he said, I think boxing could learn a lot from UFC in the sense of there's so much politics involved in boxing. It's all, like you say, it's almost essential for a fighter to keep their own, because if they don't, the politics just seem to get even worse than what they are. You've got your Canelos and your Mayweathers and stuff like that. But for the boys coming up, it's like if they pick up a loss, it's sort of like they just forget about them pretty much, and it's like the dream is over. Whereas in MMA, like Gary said, you can have 20 fights, some guys in boxing, and they haven't fought a real fight. They've just fought guys. I mean, you look at the Joshua card on the weekend. How many fights on the undercard were actually 50-50 fights? Probably one, maybe.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, you can have 15, 20 fights. You're like 15-0, 10 knockouts, but you haven't fought anyone who could potentially come back and put it on you a bit.
Yeah.
With MMA, you sort of, you know, you have maybe one gimme fight, if that, when you go pro, especially like if you want to go and fight for Cage Warrior, just like, look, you're in Europe's best now, so be prepared to fight Europe's best. You know, you're not going to be fed, guys. You're not going to be your record pie. You're going to fight the best, and if you're the best, we'll find out because you'll keep winning your fights. It's very similar, you know, in the UFC. Don't be wrong, there's guys who get fast tracked to the belt, but like you said, there's one organization with one belt. So even if they get fast tracked to a title shot,
they've got to defend it against everyone else.
Eventually, they're going to have to fight for the title. Who's the best guy in the world anyway? So it doesn't matter, you know. Whereas you see guys in boxing get a bit of a promotional push.
Yeah.
They bite their time a little bit, maybe fight for like a British title or a world title against a guy who's, you know, maybe not great, not on their level, but they've just played their cards right, waited for the time, and now they've got that label of world champion. When you know they may not, you know, I'm just trying to think of a name. Like, I don't know, but there's guys in who are world champion, but there's guys in the division who are also world champions that are 100% better than them.
Yeah.
You don't get that. If you were the best in the division, you'll have the belt, or, you know, if there's a guy below could be better than you, you're going to fight them eventually. So
but boxing,
that's almost why like a loss isn't the end of the world in MMA, because you are fighting the best. Whereas in boxing, I think is, you know, obviously if you've got that, there are exceptions in there, obviously, but if you've got that RO, then it's sort of it makes a world of difference. But how many guys have gone at the end of their career in boxing? Even some of the, you know, even a lot of the legends don't end up with an O, because, you know, eventually, I mean, obviously Kawasaki, Tyson Fury, stuff like that, but eventually, if they're going to be the best in the world, they're going to have to fight the other world champions, which is when the losses start coming in. With MMA, you probably fight in the best or the better guys a lot early on in your career. So them losses do come.
It's weird, it's a strange one, because with that then comes the social media side of it. So again, you know, if you have a loss in boxing and it's, I don't know, look at Dubois the other day, or fucking anyone, right? You know, Fury Joshua now, at some point is going to happen, hopefully, and, you know, both undefeated, all 4 belts potentially on the line. One of them's going to lose, right? Unless it's a draw. What's the chances? Social media will go berserk to whoever wins or loses. But the amount of like hate and abuse that comes out from people, and again, I touched on this with Gary, but again, you know, people who sat in their armchairs and have never done 3 3-minute rounds on the pads, let alone 3 5s in a cage or whatever, just throwing abuse at people. Like, have you ever, I suppose being undefeated, you might not quite have got as much, but have you ever had any heat on social media, and how do you deal with it if you do?
You get the odd message in the tweet. I mean, you can't take it personal, because, like you said, these guys are muppets. They're guys with fake profile pictures, fake names, never achieved fuck all in their life. So you can't let it wind you up. But at the same time, I can see the outrage, because the same people sending these messages and these tweets and these comments are the same people then, when a celebrity kills themselves, are the same people, you know, crying and sharing the, you know, let's all be nice to each other, and, you know, sharing the mental health message and sharing, you know, oh, this is a cruel world. But yet these are the same people who are abusing online. And it is easy to abuse people on Twitter and Instagram. I mean, I've had tweets, you know, never too serious, you know, just calling me this and calling me that because I'm fighting their mate, or calling me shit or whatever. I mean, I've had messages online on Instagram, you know, again, nothing too crude, but people just taking a little shot. And it's like, you know, it's easy to type it behind your phone, but I don't know, they should bring something in place where if you've got a profile, perhaps your town and your actual identity should be linked to the profile, so you know who you're talking to. And then I think you see a lot of these people, you know, back it up. But there's guys like, I mean, Joe Rogan and stuff like that, say just don't read your comments. You know, if it doesn't bother me, to be honest. I'm laid back, and if someone wants to abuse me online, all the best. I know they wouldn't abuse me in person, but you know, there are people out there we get to. There's boys in the gym I know who've sort of had a bit of slack on Twitter, and it does affect them. And I'm just like, look, they never ever say it to you in person, so try not to let it wind you up. But again, it's just social media. I think we're in the social media age, and like you said, how many people abused Daniel Dubois on the weekend, last weekend, because he took a knee? Well, and then a week later they're all backtracking because he had a fractured eye or something like that. So it's like, it's easy to say, oh, he quit, he's shit, he took the knee. It's like, let Joe Joyce thump you in the face for 10 rounds. Let's see if you drop the knee. Then, you know what I mean? You go down long before the 10th round, long before your eye is shut up.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just like, these people are morons, and they are people who've never done anything with their life. I mean, there's no one, I don't know anyone who's successful and who's achieved a lot in life that abuses people online. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it anyway.
Wild times we live in, mate. Wild times. What scares you? What are you afraid of? Anything? What fear do you have? Like, what keeps you up at night sometimes?
I'm trying to think. Probably stupid shit, ghosts and stuff like that. Maybe, but nothing. I mean, as far as like the sport goes, nothing really scares me. I mean, the only thing that used to maybe scare me a little bit is when I touched on it earlier. I signed the 5-fight deal with Cage Warriors. It was like, financially it's a good deal, but obviously the dream is to fight in the UFC. So I used to get a little bit anxious, maybe thinking like, well, what if I lose a fight now through like a freak injury or something like that, or a lucky shot? I could have signed with them maybe after being 8-0, and I've signed this deal because it's financially just going to set me up, for a good couple of years. But what if I never realised my dream because of that? Fortunately it didn't happen. But I mean, I in the sport, right, there's not a lot that scares me. There's sort of thoughts that may be a bit intimidating, like fighting in a stadium in front of, all the Welsh fans, or a British stadium. Yeah. Not intimidating, but it's a sort of like, fucking hell, you can get caught in the rabbit hole of thoughts in your mind and stuff like that. But I wouldn't say I'm scared of losing, scared of being knocked out, like scared of being subbed. Apart from being knocked out, these are all things that have happened to me in the gym. I've been subbed, I've been hit with shots I thought, fucking hell, that one hurt. I've lost rounds in the gym. I've lost grappling matches, boxing fights. So it's not like I don't know what it's like to lose. I'm not scared of losing. I'd love to be undefeated. I'd love to be the MMA's version of Joe Calzaghe. Don't get me wrong, that would be a dream come true. But at the same time, losing's a very viable option at the top of this sport. So, if it happens, it happens. I'm not afraid of it. It's just, it's just stuff like fucking ghosts and spiders and stuff like that made me scared. I'll have a more sleepless night over an horror film than I will through a fort to fight them, put it that way.
That's fucking tickled me, that. That's fair play to you, boy. Class. Will you, because obviously you were training for this fight and it's got called off in November, will you have a bit of a relax now at Christmas and enjoy yourself a bit? And then what does the future hold after that? What are you looking to get done?
Yeah, I'm still training, obviously. I'm still trying to get in, my 2 a day, my morning and night session. So I'm not doing like the 3-4.
Is that every day?
Sort of Monday to Friday out to camp, Monday to Saturday in camp. I take one day off. But like, I'm doing a 5-10K run now, maybe rather than a 5-10 miler sort of thing.
Okay.
I'm not sparring every day, or when I am sparring, it's not as intense. There's no. And when I'm rolling, I'm taking time to go with some of the newer guys and some of the lower belts rather than trying to have the toughest rounds all the time. But I'm still getting the training in. I am winding down a little bit, obviously, for Christmas. I'll have sort of a week off now over the Christmas week.
Nice.
I'll do the odd run, maybe the odd grappling session, but it's always not as intense as it was training for the fight, because your body can't take it. You keep training up. Eventually you're just going to crash and burn. I'd rather drop it sort of by 30-40%, and then when the new year comes, if I'm going to fight in March, which is what it's looking like it's going to be, then obviously I can go back up in the gears then from January onwards. But it's nice now over Christmas. It's probably the only time of the year where I take a good rest. Even out of fight camp, in the middle of the year, I'm still sort of ticking over, because I know that a fight could come up. Whereas now, I know I'm not going to be fighting in January, February. I've spoke to Graham. I know I'm not going to fight no March. So it's nice now to have a little bit more time. Like if I got to miss a day's training out, I got to go Christmas shopping or with the family, it's not the end of the world. Whereas obviously in fight camp, you can't afford to do that. So it's nice for me, to be honest, more mentally than physically. I'm a bit OCD in the sense that when I'm in fight camp, I cannot miss a session. Like if I go and miss a session, I've got to make it up somewhere else in the day or somewhere else in the week. Whereas if I miss a session now, I haven't got the demons in my head telling me, you better get out and do that run. You didn't train yesterday morning or whatever. So it's just like a little mental reset that I enjoy the most. Physically, I can train every day and feel fine. I ache, obviously, but I'm lucky I don't pick up injuries or nothing, but it's just nice to have that mental reset, that mental time away, and then obviously when I get back, then I know I'll be ready to go.
Class. How long till we're seeing you challenging for world titles in the UFC, do you reckon?
I mean, like, obviously we've had a year off pretty much now. I mean, we only had the one fight this year. What was it next year? 2021. I like to think by sort of halfway through 2022, 2023. Yeah. I mean, I'm not in a rush. I'm only 25, and I've only had 2 fights in the UFC. So, I mean, if I can get 3 fights in next year, that sort of is going to put me in a position where I can start pushing for the top 10. If I crack the top 10, then, you know, you're talking probably 2-3 fights to win a title shot because of how sort of stacked the division is. So, you know,
is that the ranking?
The rankings.
You need to get ranked. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So you need a rank. Obviously, you need to work your way up the ranking to fight for the belt. I mean, so like I said, by the end of 2023, hopefully I'm in a position where also I can keep winning, keep performing and putting on good shows that I can, you know, maybe start thinking, right, we're not a million miles away now. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not in no rush. It's just one fight at a time at the minute. As long as I'm fighting better guys every time, then that'll motivate me to keep, you know, chipping away, and eventually I can start calling for them big names then.
Class. I love that, mate. You've got a new fan in me, pal. I'll be certainly tuning in to watch a bit more UFC. Like, I just don't know if I can handle like broken bones and stuff. Like, I'm a bit of a pussy with stuff like that, mate. Like,
to be honest, you don't see a lot of like the submission stuff. Obviously, you have guys who one tap and they'll go to sleep. But
yeah,
I say that there was a fight on the weekend where a guy nearly had his arm broke because he seen a round out in a straight armbar. But very rarely, you know, do you see the freak injuries. They're once in a blue moon. You do see knockouts all the time. Don't get me wrong, but obviously, as far as like broken limbs and shins and legs go, they are funny. But you sort of build up a tolerance to it. I think when you've watched it for as long as you just try to make, oh well, that's not ideal. But, yeah, you start watching more of it, you'll build up your tolerance.
Yeah, I think I will, mate. Hey, look, I want to say a huge thank you. I want to say big thanks to Tiny Rebel Brewery because they give me a couple of beers. I got a non-alcoholic beer though because it's lunchtime, but they give me a couple of beers every month, so I can't start drinking at lunchtime even if it is Christmas. Big thanks to everyone who downloads, subscribes, rates, and reviews. Catch us on Instagram at Catflap Chats and on Twitter and Facebook as well. Jack, where can everyone find you? What's your socials?
Jack Show MMA on Instagram and Twitter, and my page is Jack Tank Show then on Facebook, and also check out my gym as well, Show MMA or Show Mixed Martial Arts. Again, we're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Anyone local want to start some training in the new year and shift those Xmas weight that they probably gained, then we got everything that you need under one roof. So come and check us out as well.
Class. I'll tag them in as well when this goes out in a couple of weeks, mate. Huge thanks. Just one last question: where did the tank come from? Where did the nicknames come from in fighting?
The tag, right? So someone tweeted me online actually the other week, and they were like, it was after one of my fights, tell a lie, and they was like, the reason they call him the tank is because there's every fighter coming towards him and he just absorbs it and keeps coming forward. And I was like, yeah, in an ideal world that would be why, but it's not. There's a guy in the UFC years ago, like UFC 1, 2, called Tank Abbott, and you probably know him. Fat guy with a goatee and just a pub brawler, just chin down, let the hands fly. Not a lot of technique to him. Yeah. And it was like a Saturday. I was only about 7 or 8, and my old man took me at the gym with him to train with his mate. And Simon Owner, old school, and he said, "Chuck the gloves on, let's have a spar." I was a little fat kid at the time, little short, chubby kid, and you know, he's up there, I'm down here. So what am I doing? Dipping in the head and coming over the top, throwing bombs. And he says, "Am I all fuck me mush?" He said, he's like a young Tank Abbott. He said, "That's what I'm calling from now on, Tank." So Simon and my dad started calling me Tank. Everyone in the gym started calling me Tank. Then all my cousins and my uncles call me Tank. And I've gone, like, literally, Tank is not my fight name. It is my nickname. The only people that call me Jack is my missus, my mother, my sister, and probably my nans. No, everyone else knows me as Tank. I mean, I see people in the street like, "All right, Tank." I'm like, "All right, boys," you know. So it's a lifelong name. I think I'll never shake it. But yeah, it comes from resembling a young Tank Abbott. So that's the story.
I fucking love that, mate. What a way to finish a podcast. Thank you so much for coming on, pal. I really appreciate that.
No
Have a
problem.
brilliant Christmas, mate. Have a wonderful time with your family. Hopefully, we can get back to some sort of new normality in the new year. And I look forward to March and seeing you back in the octagon, pal.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And obviously, we'll if I get a fight now in March, we'll do another one afterwards and review.
Oh, mate, I'd love it. I'd love it. Especially, we'll follow your journey now to that world title shot, all right?
100%. Cheers for having me. See you
Top
soon.
man. Cheers, boy. Ta-ra.